the bells of Lisvalen tolled 9 times. Each note rolled through the palace like thunder restrained behind glass. And when the final chime fell silent, the doors opened. Her Holiness, Saintess Alara of the Church of Radiant Grace. Sunlight spilled into the throne hall, gilding the marble and gold. She stepped forward, barefoot, robed in white, eyes clear as dawn. The courtiers gasped. Some even cried. They said her presence felt like a blessing. I only felt my heart stop. Because I knew the scene. The Saintess's arrival. The Queen's humiliation. The beginning of ruin. The world tilted, and for one dizzy second, the marble beneath my feet blurred into the white linoleum of a hospital room. Machines screamed in my ears. Someone shouted for a crash cart. Then, darkness. And now, this. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in a hospital bed anymore. I was standing in a palace. In silk. In jewels. And when I looked down at my trembling hands, I knew whose they were. Queen Victoria Lisvalen. The Villainess of the story Thorns of the Saintess. I had read this book before my death. I had pitied her. Hated the way everyone turned her sorrow into sin. The way her love was mocked, her dignity stripped, her death applauded. And now I was her. The courtiers bowed as Saintess Alara approached the throne. The king, Alexander Lisvalen, rose to greet her. My husband. Her destined love. Your Holiness, he said softly. Welcome to Lisvalen. May your light guide our kingdom. Alara smiled, lowering her lashes with practiced grace. I am but the vessel of the divine, your majesty. I come only to serve. Every word was honey. Every gesture, perfection. I could almost hear the narrator's voice from the novel. And thus began the dawn of Lisvalen's salvation. Except this time, the queen did not sneer. She did not lash out. She did not play her scripted role. I welcome you, Saintess, I said, rising. My voice calm. Controlled. May your days in Lisvalen bring peace. The court froze. In the book, the queen had spat venom here. Accused the Saintess of deceit. Sealed her own doom. I smiled instead. Alara's eyes flickered, confusion breaking through her saintly calm. You are gracious, your majesty. Graciousness, I replied, is often misunderstood as weakness. I hope you won't make that mistake. A ripple of whispers spread like fire. Even Alexander turned to me, startled. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. I was no longer a character in her story. I was the one rewriting it. When the court was dismissed, I remained seated long after the echo of footsteps faded. The scent of lilies lingered in the air, the Saintess's perfume. Sweet. Suffocating. I traced the edge of the throne beside mine, the seat where Alexander had sat moments ago. In the book, he would soon stop sitting there at all. He would avoid me. Despise me. Condemn me. I laughed. Softly at first, then louder, until it echoed through the empty hall. I died once, I whispered. I won't die again, not for him. Outside, the bells tolled again. Through the windows, the city glittered beneath the morning sun, unaware that history had just changed. The story spoke often of Arravale, the creeping blight that rotted fields and hearts alike. It was always the excuse, the justification for witch hunts, for sacrifices, for executions. And later, it would be the Saintess's weapon against me. But now that I knew the script, I could play it better. That night, I studied my reflection. Silver hair pinned beneath the queen's coronet. Eyes like stormlight. A face both foreign and familiar. I lifted a hand to my cheek and smiled. This time, I murmured, I will not chase love. I will choose freedom. When dawn came, I ordered scarlet silk for the temple reception. The maids hesitated. Your Majesty, white is customary when greeting the Saintess. Scarlet, I said again. The color of sovereignty. Let her shine like light. I will stand as fire. And as the palace bells rang anew, I stepped into my role. Not as the forsaken queen, but as the woman who refused her fate. The next morning, the palace glowed with anticipation. White banners fluttered from the towers. The symbol of the radiant church, sun over silver water, hung above the gates. The Saintess had taken residence in the East Wing, once reserved for visiting monarchs. Now, it seemed even kings bowed to her holiness. At breakfast, the court gathered beneath chandeliers of crystal and gold. Alexander sat at the head of the table, regal, untouchable. I sat beside him, the queen in name, the ghost in truth. Alara entered last. Late enough to be noticed. Graceful enough to be forgiven. Her smile glimmered as she bowed. Forgive me, Your Majesty. The morning prayers took longer than I expected. Alexander's voice softened, too softly. You need not apologize. Your devotion honors us. Devotion. Such a beautiful word, when it wasn't another name for obsession. I lifted my teacup, hiding the faint curl of my lips. Indeed, Saintess. The gods must be most comforted by your diligence. I only hope their light leaves enough time for the affairs of men. A few courtiers choked on their wine. Alara's lashes fluttered. Of course, Your Majesty. Her tone sweetened, but her smile did not reach her eyes. The rest of the meal passed in silence, broken only by the murmur of silverware and the whisper of silk. And beneath it all, the quiet tension of two women smiling across a blade. Later, during the Council of Lords, the serpent court began to coil. Rumors floated like perfume, soft, poisonous, impossible to ignore. They said the queen no longer shared the king's chambers. They said she feared the Saintess's divine light. They said she had grown cold, unstable, perhaps even touched by the shadow they called Arravale. I listened to every whisper, each word a thread in the web Alara was spinning. She was clever. In the book, she destroyed the queen not with daggers, but with pity. And yet, when she sought to corner me again at the next audience, I gave her something new to pity. Your Majesty, she began, her voice carrying over the courtiers, the temple petitions for increased funding to cleanse the northern villages. The Arravale corruption spreads faster than expected. The courtiers murmured agreement. Even Alexander looked concerned. I rose, slowly, my crown catching the light. Then let us send healers and food, not soldiers and priests. The people need comfort, not fear. Illyra blinked. But the blight is of spiritual origin. Only holy rites can banish it. Then we will bless their fields with kindness, I said, my smile sharp. Not suspicion. The nobles bowed their heads, whispering approval. Even Alexander hesitated, torn between reason and faith. The Saintess faltered, her voice barely a whisper. You risk inviting the curse upon yourself, Your Majesty. I met her eyes. If compassion is a curse, then let it come. The silence that followed was almost holy. That night, the palace glittered with candlelight for the Feast of Blessings. A night of prayer and abundance. A night, in the book, when the Saintess first outshone the Queen before all of court. Illyra appeared in robes of shimmering white. The gold embroidery caught the light like fire. The king's gaze never left her. I wore crimson silk, heavy with jewels. Scarlet amidst ivory. Flame against snow. When the musician struck the first note, Alexander extended his hand, not to me, but to her. The Saintess smiled softly, placing her hand in his. The court sighed in admiration. It was supposed to be my breaking point. The chapter titled The Queen's Fall from Grace. Instead, I lifted my glass. To Her Holiness, I said, voice steady. May her light never dim. Gasps rippled through the hall. Even Alexander paused mid-step. Illyra curtsied slightly. You are generous, Your Majesty. I am practical, I replied. After all, when one walks beside the divine, one must be careful not to cast too long a shadow. The courtiers laughed, politely, nervously. The Saintess's smile strained, her composure cracking like glass beneath pressure. And I felt it. The first tremor of fear from the woman who thought she ruled my story. When the feast ended, I stood by the balcony overlooking the gardens. The night air was cold, but the stars burned bright. From below, I could hear the faint echo of hymns drifting from the temple. Once, the original Victoria would have watched the same view and cried. She would have prayed for the king's love, begged for mercy, cursed the Saintess's name. I only breathed in the silence. He can have his light, I whispered to the darkness. I'll make my own. And somewhere, deep in the distance, thunder rolled across the horizon. A sound like a page turning. The palace gardens bloomed in winter that year. Strange, how beauty thrived even when warmth had long fled the air. They said it was the Saintess's blessing, her divine power cleansing the blight. But I saw the servants pouring ash and salt into the roots when they thought no one watched. Miracles always had a mortal hand behind them. I had begun to learn that truth. By now, Illyra's name filled every mouth in the court. The nobles adored her. The priests worshipped her. The king defended her. And I simply observed. It was a skill my predecessor lacked, the patience to watch her own destruction unfold without panic. But I knew this story. Every betrayal. Every wound yet to come. And I refused to bleed on cue. When the petitions for aid reached my desk, I read every one. Each plea from the starving villages spoke not of Erebor, but of taxes. Of land seized by the church in divine service. Of offerings demanded in gold and grain. So I changed the decree. All aid, I wrote, will pass through the crown, not the church. The ink barely dried before the whispers began. The queen seeks to defy the gods. She hoards the kingdom's tithes. She is corrupted. I smiled when I heard them, because it meant my move had struck where it hurt. Days later, the Saintess came to my chambers. Unannounced. Her white gown swept the marble like a sigh, her hands clasped in feigned humility. "Your Majesty," she began softly, "I come not as the Saintess, but as a woman concerned." I rose from my desk. "Concerned about what?" "You," she said, lowering her lashes. "You've been distant. Withdrawn. The king worries." "The king worries," I repeated. "How touching." Her smile tightened. "He loves this kingdom. And you are its heart. You mustn't let the Aravale corrupt it." I circled her slowly, my footsteps echoing against the cold marble. "So this is how it begins," I murmured. "The whispers, the doubts, the gentle pity. Tell me, Alara, when you dreamed of being the Saintess, did you ever wonder who your Villainous would be?" Her eyes flickered. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." I stopped behind her. "You've read this part before too, haven't you?" For a heartbeat, her mask slipped. Just enough. Shock. Recognition. The faintest flicker of fear. And that was when I knew. She was not the only one who had crossed worlds. At the next council, I unveiled the Queen's Relief Fund, an effort to rebuild the northern farmlands. The nobles who once sneered at me now nodded in approval. Even those who had sided with the Saintess began to waver. Power, after all, did not care for holiness. It cared for results. Alexander watched me throughout the meeting. For the first time in months, there was something unreadable in his eyes. When the session ended, he approached. "Victoria," he said quietly. "You've changed." "I had to," I replied. "Someone needed to." He hesitated. "Alara worries your—" I raised a hand. "Alara worries too much. Perhaps she should pray for herself instead." He frowned, but said nothing. And in his silence, I found a strange satisfaction. The turning point came during the masquerade. A night of masks, music, and lies dressed as laughter. I wore black lace and silver, my face half shielded, my eyes bare. Alara arrived draped in white feathers, radiant beneath the chandeliers. The courtiers swarmed her like moths to flame. When the dance ended, she stepped forward, voice trembling with false humility. "Your Majesty," she said loudly enough for all to hear, "forgive me, but I sense darkness near you. The taint of Aravale grows stronger each day." Gasps erupted. Even the musicians faltered. I met her gaze and smiled. "Is that so?" I said softly. "Then perhaps you should cleanse it." Her lips parted, a prayer forming. But no light came. The silence that followed was deafening. Then I laughed. Quiet, sharp, and certain. "Tell me, Saintess," I said, stepping closer. "Do you call everything you cannot understand a sin?" Her face paled. Alexander rose from his throne, voice sharp. "Enough, both of you." I turned to him, my heart calm. Your Majesty, I have done nothing but stand where I have always stood. It is she who cannot bear my shadow. And then I bowed, perfectly, elegantly, before walking away. Behind me, the court whispered. The Saintess trembled. The king stared after me as if seeing me for the first time. Later, alone in my chambers, I let the silence settle around me. The firelight painted gold against the walls, flickering like dying hope. I touched the ring on my finger, the symbol of a marriage that had become a chain. Once, I had begged for his love. Now, I only wanted my freedom. I was the villainess in your story, I whispered to the empty air. But in mine, I am the one who survives. Outside, thunder cracked again across the horizon. And somewhere deep within the palace walls, I felt it. The first tremor of the Saintess's unraveling. They called it the trial of purity. A test, they said, to separate the righteous from the corrupted. But I knew better. It was never about purity. It was about power. The bells rang for 7 days before the decree was read aloud. By divine command, the herald cried, Her Majesty, Queen Victoria of Solaria, shall stand before the holy tribunal to prove her innocence against the taint of Reborn. The crowd gasped as if the heavens had fallen. And perhaps, for them, they had. I stood at the balcony, watching their faces tilt upward like flowers toward sunlight. Blind, hopeful, desperate. Alara's light had made them believe. But faith without thought is a leash. And she held the other end. The night before the trial, the king came to me. Alexander's armor gleamed silver in the torchlight, but his eyes were heavy with doubt. Victoria, he said, if you confess, the church will show mercy. I looked up from the letter I was writing. Confess to what? To consorting with Reborn. He stopped, his voice cracking slightly. You can't win against the Saintess. Her miracles are illusions, I finished. And you, of all people, should know how much illusion costs. His jaw tightened. You've changed, he said again. No, I whispered. I've only woken up. He left without another word. But as he turned away, I caught the faintest flicker of shame in his eyes. It was almost enough to make me hesitate. Almost. The tribunal took place in the grand hall of light. Marble pillars stretched toward the heavens, etched with scripture that gleamed like fresh blood beneath the sun. 1,000 candles burned, and still the air felt cold. The priests stood in rows of white. The Saintess in the center, radiant, serene. And me, draped in mourning black, the accused queen. Her Majesty stands before the gods, intoned the high priest. If her soul is untainted, the divine flame shall not consume her. They brought forth the brazier, an ancient relic said to reveal impurity through fire. I almost laughed. They wanted spectacle, not truth. Alara stepped closer. Her eyes glimmered with false sorrow. I never wished for this, Your Majesty, she said softly. But Aravel's shadow must be cleansed. You mistake your reflection for shadow, I murmured. She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hands. The flame leapt high, white and holy. The crowd gasped as the light enveloped me. Pain flared, but not from heat, from memory. I saw flashes of the other life. A hospital room. A machine flatlining. A whisper, asterisk you failed her, Victoria star. And then silence. The flame dimmed. When it cleared, I still stood. My gown untouched. My eyes open. A murmur spread through the hall. She lives. The flame did not burn her. Is she blessed? The priests faltered. Even Alara's composure cracked. The high priest stumbled over his own words. It seems the gods have spared her. I stepped down from the dais, the air humming faintly around me. Perhaps, I said clearly, the gods tire of being used as weapons. The hall fell silent. Alara's lips trembled. And then, for the first time, I saw true fear in her eyes. That night, the city sang of miracles. Some said the queen was chosen by a higher power. Others whispered she had struck a bargain darker than death. Both were wrong. I was simply a woman who refused to burn. In the quiet of my chambers, I traced the faint mark the flame had left on my wrist, a scar shaped like a crescent. A mark of survival, not divinity. I looked out the window, where the palace gardens shimmered silver beneath the moonlight. Once, they said Alara's prayers made them bloom. Now, they flourished without her. Power shifts quietly, like the tide. And tonight, it had turned in my favor. Still, I knew better than to celebrate. Alara would not fall so easily. And the church had only begun to bare its teeth. But I smiled nonetheless. Let them come. Because I had seen the truth within that divine flame. And it had whispered my name. I am not their saint. I am not their villain. I am the queen who will not kneel. They said the gods had gone silent. But silence, I learned, was not mercy. It was the sound of judgment beginning. The miracle at the tribunal changed everything. Whispers slithered through the palace corridors like smoke. The queen lives by divine grace. The Saintess's light flickers. The king prays, but no answer comes. I felt their gazes shift, cautious, reverent, fearful. The same mouths that had spat venom now bowed low. Ah, how quickly devotion changes direction when miracles lose their shine. Alara did not appear in court for a fortnight. The priests claimed she was in deep prayer. But I knew the look of desperation when I saw it. She was unraveling. I should have felt triumphant. I did not. Because victory, I realized, tastes a lot like exhaustion. Then came the day of the royal banquet, the anniversary of the king's ascension. Every noble from Solaria to the eastern provinces filled the hall with gilded laughter and empty praise. I wore white silk that night, a color they once forbade me, the hue of innocence. And when I entered, every eye turned to me as though they'd seen a ghost. Alexander's gaze lingered longer than most. For the first time in years, I saw hesitation behind that crown. Regret, even. Alara will attend tonight, he said quietly as I passed. She insisted. I only smiled. Then let her. She came at dusk. The Saintess of light, cloaked in celestial fabric, face pale, eyes fevered. When she raised her hand, her rings clattered against her cup. Your Majesty, she said sweetly, we meet again, under kinder stars. I lifted my goblet, the wine deep as spilled blood. Stars don't choose sides, Saintess. People do. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The court watched, breathless. They all knew this was no dinner. This was war, gilded in etiquette. As the orchestra played, the high priest entered, flanked by 2 acolytes. He carried a scroll sealed with the church's crest. A divine edict, he declared. By order of the Holy Synod, Saintess Alara is to return to the sacred dominion for purification. Gasps rippled through the room. Alara stood frozen, lips parted. Purification? That's impossible. I have done nothing wrong. But the high priest did not meet her eyes. He only said, "The gods have withdrawn their favor. No light answers your call." The hall went still. I did not move, did not speak. I simply watched as Alara's composure fractured, piece by piece. She turned to Alexander, tears trembling at the corners of her lashes. "My king, please. Tell them this is false." He hesitated. Once, he would have leapt to defend her. Now, his silence was heavier than any verdict. "Alara," he said at last, "if the church commands it, we cannot defy the will of the gods." Her face crumpled. For the first time, the Saintess looked human. She reached out, to him, to me, to anyone, but found only air. Then the acolytes seized her arms, dragging her away as her voice broke into sobs. The grand doors closed behind her. And just like that, the light she had stolen was gone. That night, I walked the moonlit halls alone. The silence was different now, not heavy, not cruel. Just empty. I paused before the throne room. Alexander sat there still, crown set aside, hands clasped as if in prayer. When he lifted his head, the man who had once been my enemy looked small. "Victoria," he said softly, "was I wrong?" I met his eyes. "Yes," I said. "But not just about me." He swallowed hard. "Then what now? Will you take revenge?" "No." I turned away. "I'm taking my freedom." At dawn, I left Solaria. No escort. No crown. Just the clothes on my back and the road stretching eastward, toward a land they once called cursed. The air was different beyond the borders, wilder, alive. Aravel's remnants pulsed faintly beneath the soil, not corruption but raw, unclaimed magic. Perhaps it had never been evil at all. Perhaps the church feared it because it was beyond their control. I smiled at the thought. As the sun rose, I looked back once, at the glittering spires of Solaria fading into gold mist. Once, that place had been my cage. Now, it was my past. In the distance, I saw a caravan waiting, merchants from the southern continent, bound for the free lands. They waved, welcoming. I took a breath. The wind carried the faint scent of new beginnings. And for the first time since I woke in this world, I felt something like peace. They would tell my story, of course. Some would call me the fallen queen. Others, the unburned witch. Let them choose their version. Because I knew the truth. I was neither villain nor saint. Just a woman who refused to die the same way twice. And as I stepped into the dawn, I whispered to the world that had once condemned me. This time, I choose myself. They say time softens all things. But I don't think that's true. Time doesn't soften, it refines. It carves away the noise, the ache, the names you no longer answer to, until what's left is only truth. Years have passed since I left Solaria. Now, when people speak my name, it's in stories whispered by firelight. Some say I became a wandering healer. Others, a ruler of the distant free lands. Both are true, in a way. Here, beyond the sea, there are no saints. No kings. No holy flames demanding sacrifice. Just people, flawed, kind, stubborn, trying to live beneath skies that have forgotten the weight of judgment. And I found peace among them. Sometimes, I walk by the shore at dusk, when the waves glow faintly with silver light, remnants of the magic once called Reborn. It hums softly in my veins now, gentle and wild, like the heartbeat of a world reborn. They said I was cursed. But the curse was never the magic. It was the fear of it. I still dream of Solaria. In those dreams, I see Alexander, older, quieter, his crown dull with dust. He sits by the balcony where once I stood accused, staring into the horizon as if waiting for something that will never return. Perhaps he finally understands what it means to lose something you never valued until it was gone. I do not hate him. Hate is a chain, and I've broken enough of those to last a lifetime. When the wind changes, I sometimes imagine it carries the voices of those still trapped in their own cages, women told to endure, men too proud to see, hearts too afraid to choose themselves. And to them, I would say this. You do not owe anyone your suffering. You do not need to burn to prove you were pure. If you ever find yourself standing before a world that demands your silence, walk away. You will be surprised at how light the air feels when you finally breathe for yourself. If my story has reached you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or trapped by someone else's idea of who you should be, then take this as your sign. Your freedom is not a sin. Your peace is not betrayal. And if you'd like to hear more stories like mine, of women who rise, fall, and rise again, stay a little longer. *like. Subscribe. Listen, *. Because somewhere, someone else needs to hear this too. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is a story told at the right time. I turn back to the sea, the wind cool against my face. A gull cries overhead. The sun dips low, painting the waves gold. This time, the ending is mine to write.